Hello, and welcome back to the Navigating the Healing Path podcast with Maggie and Nicki. On today's episode, we are going to be talking about the dangers, if you will, of being an authentic, awake, conscious being in, I suppose, what we would call a sleeping or more unconscious world. And we will be diving into some of our personal experiences of what it's been like growing up in this world and learning to nurture ourselves over time to create space for our authenticity and our true selves to shine through and to live this life instead of allowing our ego programs and our conditioning to rule us and the decisions that we make and how we choose to show up in the world. So if this resonates or is of interest to you, then we would love if you stuck around.
The challenges of being ourself, our true self, and not the self we were raised to be, to fill a role, but truly honor our soul's goals and desires to experience. And getting there into that freedom can be quite the uphill challenge, I would say. Shall we breathe, Maggie?
Yes.
Excellent.
I could use some breathing.
So let's connect with each other and to the listeners through our breath, through connection and dropping into our bodies. So go ahead, take a breath. And release. Bringing our awareness down into our center, into our heart. Expanding and connecting again. Breathe in. And release. Getting into it. This feels like a really vulnerable episode. I've noticed this. And we've noticed when the episodes kind of correlate and go alongside with our own personal growth and healing.
Most of them do.
Yeah, most of them do, right? It tends to come up when we record it and then again when we're editing and releasing it, which is double the fun. So
That's a word for it.
Quite interesting.
Yes.
But yeah, I can feel some of the resistance within myself to expose some of these old hurts, these old thoughts that didn't have a lot of room growing up. And it's like, why would you share that? Why would you talk about this? But I think that's why we're talking about it, is because it is difficult. And it's not always easy to find space to speak our truth and be validated and be related to in that way, because that's part of the issue, was that we've had all these experiences of where we tried to show up as ourselves and we were judged or ridiculed. I received a lot of ridicule for being myself. So, yeah. Ooh, who wants to talk about that? Whose idea was this?
Yeah, God. Who thought we would have to show up and be vulnerable on this podcast? God.
Fucking spirit. I blame you for all the inspiration. Be like, yes, it'd be a great idea. And then we get here, we're like, this was the worst idea ever.
Yeah. Well, if it helps the vulnerable feeling and the ego resistances that you're experiencing right now, I can at least share that when we originally tried to record this episode, we ended up having to stop at about a quarter of the way in because I ended up having kind of a freak out because things were getting way too vulnerable feeling for my ego, and I just ended up having to pause and cry and release because we were touching on some, some core things with me. And if you're interested about hearing a bit more about that, I believe that should be a bit of our conversation, maybe on the Patreon for those interested. But I'm sure that what I was releasing will come up in conversation today. So I'm here with you with that vulnerability. I support it, I honor it, and I show up in it with you. And we're showing up and in it for everyone listening.
Yes, indeed. And I am here for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I really do have a great passion and motivation to be authentic and real and normalize these kinds of conversations. Just it's basic communication. This is all I'm really going for, is like, this is my experience. This is how I see it, how I felt it, how I dealt with it, and here's how I'm healing it. I don't think there's really anything wrong with what I'm saying necessarily, but it's the ego being worried about being judged for these things.
Right.
Being made fun of. Yeah, I was constantly teased growing up in quote unquote good fun. We've touched on this a little bit in our previous episodes. But for something that is truly a gift of mine, which is joy and laughter and sweetness and caring, all of these beautiful, wonderful gifts.
Can confirm you have those gifts.
Oh, thank you. While they would either get used and abused or ridiculed, like made fun of. I would get made fun of for my laugh, for my expressing my joy and humor, and it would just end up shutting me down. I don't like being shut down, but that was the pattern, right? Growing up, I was constantly expressing myself, and then I would get shut down, verbally, emotionally, whatever it is. Prodding, poking, like however sort of just manipulated and controlled, and I don't know. It fucking sucked. Made me feel like something was wrong with me. Like I wasn't getting something. I was always too much, too sensitive, too emotional, too loud. Wanted too much attention. Hardly got any. I thought, that was wrong. I should just never expect any attention. I should just be grateful for the crumbs that I got. Ooh. Oh, I hate that. It brings up like old resentments. Like, this shit sucks. I hate talking about this.
Well, you've done so much work to cultivate a life for yourself that is no longer like that.
It's not. Yeah.
You've really shown up and set your boundaries and have only allowed people in your life that do the exact opposite of those things. Yeah, I feel like I faced a lot of, I don't want to say ridicule. And I think part of my own personal journey is a lot of the judgment that I was facing, I think, was oftentimes more self-inflicted than actually externally received, which is very interesting. Although I have definitely faced some external opposition, judgment, if you will, for just the way that I was. Although it kind of felt more like subtle societal, backhand. Like, I feel like I was just a sponge for these, like, very quiet societal undertones and expectations that I very deeply internalized and tried to regulate myself to always meet those expectations. But for me, I feel like things weren't directly spoken. And I think that made me question myself a lot. So, yeah, I feel like we have very similar programs and conditioning and experiences growing up, but in slightly different ways and slightly different flavors. They just manifested in different ways, but it's very similar. So I'm excited to see how our conversation continues to unfold through this and to see what personal experiences we do end up sharing, and just, yeah, I don't know, just like the nurturing that we found over these last few years and the coping mechanisms that have helped us to grow into our authenticity and to help cultivate and nurture the space and ourselves to show up the way that we really actually want to show up. I'm trying to see if there's any question.
I was looking. I
Looming in the
heard you
air.
listening.
You heard me listening. That's so funny.
I saw you listening. Yeah, I heard you. Yeah, you have very expressive face, and
I can't hide anything.
no, and I really actually appreciate that. It takes all the guessing away. It's just really easy to read you.
Love that and hate that. I'm just kidding. I've always been told that I have a very expressive face. I have a hard time hiding things. Even when I try to hide things, it's very apparent that I'm trying to hide things.
Yeah, you know if I don't like you. It's very clear. I also stopped caring or trying to hide it. You know. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Why repress emotions and what we're feeling?
Oh,
That's
because
we're
it
trying
makes
to
other
undo
people
that.
uncomfortable, Maggie. Obviously,
This
they
is
don't
what
know
we're
how
trying
to
to
handle
undo.
emotions of other people. Oh my god, dude. For disclaimer purposes, I am quite triggered today. I am going through a whole lot, so I am easily riled. I'm in my feelings is all I'm saying. I'm in my feelings, and I'm dealing with a lot of old wounds, if you will. And it's just really fucking funny to me how this particular episode is kind of connected to a lot of these things that I'm healing currently and going through. So, yeah, I'm angsty today. I could probably cry if the mood comes over me. So, yeah, I'm here showing up, working anyway, doing the things, even though I have a lot of emotions. There's a lot of emotions today. And it's good. It really is good. Because it's good for me to express them, to feel them again, and in a safe way. And I feel very safe around you. And I also know I'm not going to like try to hurt you with any of these things, because that's never what I want to do. I never want to hurt anybody with my truth or my stories or my experiences or how I show up. I really don't. And it does bother me when I accidentally do hurt people. But anyway, that's because I think I was taught that hurts. My truth, my feelings, especially if they were negative, that was one thing that wasn't really allowed. Anger, feelings, crying. No crying. Stop crying.
No quote unquote negative emotions allowed.
Yeah. There was no coping. There was no skills. I think that's really, it's not just my family.
No,
I think that's like
that's been the norm for generations.
Which is why there's so many books now and so much this huge generational cycle healing movement is because we're really beginning to look at how harmful a lack of emotional maturity is on development.
Yeah.
It sucks to accidentally hurt the people that you love. Sometimes intentionally. It depends on the programming that you have. But a lot of it, I really do believe a lot of it was accidental. They just didn't have the skills, the know-how, the ability to question and look. Because of all the indoctrination from schools and religion and the family dynamic and communities, there's a lot of don't ask, don't tell. Secrets. And when you're a truth teller, when you're the sacred rebel that's there to be like, what the fuck is happening? Why is like Aunt Lala in the corner not talking to anybody? You know, nobody. No, we don't talk about that. Well, why? Because it's uncomfortable? Because there's feelings you don't know how to deal with? I mean, really, how do we learn that as humans? Lots of trial and error, I think. Emotions are tough to navigate.
Yeah.
Anyway.
They are tough to navigate. Yeah, just being products of the world that we've lived in, the unconscious world, the repressing world. And I think a lot of our authenticity lies in our emotions. Emotions are such a great information teller and our own personal compass towards how we're feeling and what feels good and what doesn't feel good and what we want to move towards in career or the people that we want to have relationship with. And let me know if this is your experience too. But as you talked about the lack of emotional maturity and emotional regulation and just any acknowledgement of emotions, period, or feeling of them, I feel like my experience growing up, I think a lot of the times when I felt like I couldn't show up as myself, it's the repression of emotions or thoughts, like a forcing, like a pushing down of what I was really feeling in order to fall in line with other people's expectations and what they wanted in the moment. I guess I'm thinking about a blanket theory, and I'd love your thoughts on this. Do you think the main reason it feels so hard to be our true genuine selves in this world is due to that lack of emotional understanding, due to the emotional immaturity and the repression that most of the world was participating in? Because let me know if you need more
No, I
clarity.
feel like I understand what you're saying. And in a very simplistic way, yeah. Because, like you said, our emotions are our guide. It lets us know if we're safe or not. But when we're taught at a very young age that you can't trust your emotions, you can trust this authority figure to tell you what to think or how to act or what to do or what role to play, you disconnect from your soul's creativity and manifesting its life and having this experience. Instead, you let somebody else play your part for you, to orchestrate, to control you. And yeah, yeah, I think so. Because then how else do we know when to leave situations?
Mm.
Our emotions, if it feels bad, if we feel awful about ourselves, but when we're conditioned to believe that that's the normal, that that's expected, that's just how it is, this is how it is, you have to accept it, it creates a dissonance within us. I don't know, it made me feel crazy. It made me feel wrong for wanting to follow my dreams or my heart or not understanding why I was drawn somewhere else or why I just couldn't get on board with how everything was. It felt like death to me. It felt like the end of me.
Mm.
I would have sacrificed my well being for the machine. And I think that's what caused a lot of issues too, was because I was deeply feeling, but I had to go numb for so long because there was nowhere for me to process or to understand or to learn about how I was feeling. There was no one equipped around me to help me navigate my sensitive system or understand what I was going through. And once I got to certain places, as I've grew and evolved and moved on and actually followed myself and my callings, gifts started to come online, understandings, insights, as I continued to heal.
Mm.
And it makes me wonder how my life would have been different if I had a community of emotionally mature, insightful, spiritual people like us, that so many of us have become, because it's soul food. It's resourcing. It feels better to have space for all of you and however you show up. Like that's the whole rule on our Sunday group is you just show up as you are. I don't care. Be funky. Talk about your funk.
Yeah.
I've come plenty of times all funked out. And then I talked about it. I'm like, oh, I feel so much better.
Yeah. Same rule with this podcast.
Right.
We show up as we are.
Which is why I didn't mind showing up crying when we first started.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it's fine. It's going to be fine, Angel. It's good. Right? You guys are funny.
And wonderful job, by the way.
Thank you.
Feeling, releasing.
Yeah, that was good. It was good. Once I was like, are we done? Okay, I think we're good. I felt the shift. Like when my body was like, okay, we could be done for now. We'll come back to this. We'll circle back in a little bit. But still, I can feel things rising up, right? This old stuff. And some of the things that I had brought up earlier, they just want some attention. And so, noted, you know. I will come back and dip in and give it a listen. You know, maybe do some writing. Might be nice. Do a little bit more exploration. But I like your theory. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, I had never thought about it that way before. And it did admittedly take me a second to piece together. But it was just like a little, I don't know, just like a little star that got dropped in the galaxy of my brain.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And I was just like, okay, how do I
What are your
how do I
thoughts
extract
on it?
this? On the theory?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that is an accurate theory to what I have personally experienced growing up. Yeah, I really feel like I was a sponge for those underlying parental, school, general society expectations. And a lot of those expectations were forcing or ignoring or denying or repressing or disowning emotions or thoughts that I was having. And I think all the times that I and you and anyone was made to feel wrong is because of what we were feeling emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
And those emotions were inspiring certain thoughts or ideas. And those would be the things that would get rejected and make it feel like, oh, it's not safe for us to be who we are, to express what we are inherently feeling. A good example of this is around my sexuality, which this is the main thing that arose when we were originally trying to record this podcast episode. I've held a lot of shame for most of my life around my sexuality and being in a female body and being attracted to other females and women and more feminine energy. And that, while I haven't experienced like outright homophobia in this current life that I've lived, I mean, I'm incredibly blessed and privileged to live in Southern California, which I feel like is really one of the best and safest places to be anything that falls under the blanket of queer or just non-straight, non-norms, sexuality norms. But I mean, that in and of itself, the shame that I have carried for so long, that's an emotional and physical denial and repression. And I feel like if a lot of the people around my life, or just in life in general, had more emotional maturity to at least be able to hold different truths amongst different people, you know, I feel like a lot of the backlash and the shame that arose was from religious communities, even though I didn't grow up really religious at all, and in any sort of specific church, that was still just as the sponge that I was, as the sensitive, empathic being that I was, I just like soaked this soaked this up from people. And yeah, I guess in to continue the thought, religious communities, I feel like there is really a lack of emotional regulation and maturity and understanding of just life, and allowing lots of different things to be true, and for people to live their truths even if they're in contradiction to somebody else's truth.
It's really about belief. And what's coming for me as you talk about this is the undercurrent of fear in those kinds of communities. It's not like emotional maturity is definitely the big umbrella, but that's the stick that holds it up. You know, fear, homophobia, and racism and xenophobia, afraid of other cultures. There's a sense of fear that something will be taken away or that they'll be wrong. There's this huge thing where people never want to be wrong.
Right.
And there is no real right and wrong. There just is. And there's different ways of being and behaving and seeing how the world works. And one person being flamboyantly gay does not take away anything from the Baptist or Protestant or evangelical who's, regurgitating the fear-based chorus of bullshit that they've been inundated with. They've been conditioned to fear and identify what is wrong, which then makes you right. So anything outside of what you're doing is wrong. It's controlling. It's fear-based. It's a lack of perspective, because emotional maturity is marked by being able to have your emotions and then simultaneously allowing somebody else to have contradictive emotions, but also being able to see where they're coming from.
Right.
That's the maturity part. Is like, I have my feelings, you have your feelings. Where are you coming from? And then you get to see where they're coming from. Can you see it from their perspective? Can you see that? Can you feel that? It doesn't matter who's right or wrong. There's a third person who has an even better advantage point and has a better perspective and can tell you, like, you both are being assholes right now, actually. So sometimes that's why we need that perspective. We need to be able to chunk out, to see it from the outside a bit more, so you can see the whole picture. You're not just stuck on the fender bender. You're seeing the whole scene, how it culminated. But that lack of presence, the wanting to be better than or be right and being in fear, all of this just messes up the communication and the resolution of the issues that can rise.
Yeah.
Fear is a bitch.
Yeah. It is. It's very controlling, and it is also quite powerful in the human condition. It's very, very motivating.
It's like nuclear. Like, I've said this before. Fear is transmissible through airwaves, through sound, through television and radio and thoughts and all of that. It's like it just goes out. Whereas love is personal. It's a touch. You need to be touched. It needs to be like in this space and, passed on, shared one at a time.
Yeah, it is really interesting how that works.
And it's almost like our brains have been conditioned to focus on the fear. And that's how this whole world was built, on greed and power, because they have a fear that they won't have it, or their generations down the line won't have it. So they want to secure that. They want to take care of their own people, instead of realizing we're all people on this planet. We're all connected on this planet and then to the universe. We need to grow up as people and evolve, become more conscious, loving beings.
Yeah. You and I have been doing a lot of work to be able to show up as those conscious beings
Who lives in our heart.
who lives in our heart. And hopefully, at least for me, the intention, and you could say goal, that might not be the best word in this case, is to inspire other people to show up as themselves, to feel the emotions that they're feeling, to build the courage and the space to authentically share. That is why I do this work for myself, is to show and hold that space for other people, because I think this is how we change the world. Is the work that we are doing, and the work that so many other people on this planet are doing, which is fabulous. We say it's work because it is work.
It is.
With, we're actively fighting for a life that is the opposite of what we experienced growing up. We're trying to create that contrast for ourselves. And, polarity in the universe is a universal law.
It is.
We are here. Part of why we are here is to experience polarity. And, when we experience conflict, we will eventually experience resolve in some way. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. That's how we heal. So amongst this work, what has been your, I guess, process or favorite tools, methods, whatever comes to mind, for how you've cultivated this space for yourself? How have you nurtured the real you and shown it that it's okay to be here? Or how have you brought that part of you in to yourself and released? Because I know a lot of this is more releasing, I guess, than anything. It's letting go of the things that are not us, rather than us. Rather than learning. Not learning.
It's emerging, unfolding.
Yeah.
So the more you release the old programs, limiting beliefs, the roles that you were made to play, the traumas that have harmed you, the emotions that you've repressed, as you release and you process and you go through this, you're creating space for you. So it's like you do it in tandem. As you release, you're filling that space, that void, with light, with you, with your soul. And so it starts within you, usually one-on-one therapy or in groups, a safe space for you to be validated in your feelings and your experiences, and you're going to pick up coping tools along the way so that when you get triggered, these other things come up, you have tools to help you resolve and regulate your emotions, because that's what they're there for. The triggers in life are there to bring up the stuff that needs to be healed. So you learn to create space for that. And then as you become safe to be you and explore you and experiment with how you want to show up, because you might have an idea and you try, we're like, well, that failed, or I didn't like how that felt, or they didn't respond how I thought they would. And it's a process. And then it begins to grow. And then you have a safe community where you allow yourself to be seen and be vulnerable, and you practice giving that to others at the same time. You allow you to be you. Therefore, by proxy, you allow others to be themselves. And so when more data and emotions come in and boundaries are discovered, you get to hold them and begin to create a bubble of safety around you. First through your inner circle, your immediate family. And if they're not respectful, or they like it better the way that you used to be, because they were directly benefiting from you being that way, that's when the boundaries really come in. I'm like, okay, I get it. I get that this could be hard to accept, but this is me. I don't tolerate that type of behavior. It's okay that you do it, but if you continue, I'm going to go out of the room. And so those are really good moments for you to be yourself, because you like, boundaries are not meant to be harmful. They can be hurtful. They can hurt when you're cutting out certain people because you have a connection, you've had a relationship, but they're not meant to harm. They're not causing you physical or emotional harm. They're trying to just protect themselves. Like they broke their arm and they have a cast on. And if you touch or bump into it, it's going to hurt. And so while they're healing, while you're healing and you're allowing more space for you to flow and to be yourself, sometimes you need that protective bubble. And so it is a process of unfolding, of giving yourself more and more space with more and more people. But also a big one is letting go of what other people think. Because that, I think, is one of the biggest things that would get in my way, is like, well, what will they think of me? Comes back to judgment and ridicule, and I'm doing it wrong. But ultimately, if I'm not hurting anybody by just being my goofy, weird self, that's not harmful.
Yeah. Can I ask what things, I guess maybe within the last 20 years, because that's how you would define your healing?
I moved out here 21
journey?
years ago
Okay.
to really focus on getting to know me and healing.
Okay. So over the last 20 years, what have been some of the main things that have come up in you that you have been worried that other people will judge you for, and what has been released in that process of them coming up?
That me telling my truth can hurt people by telling my story. Because when you talk about your childhood in a not so positive manner, it can make your family feel guilt and shame around how it was, but that's not my intention. My intention is just to honor my story and experience, be like, it might not have been all accurate either, because children, you don't understand everything, So I'm not saying that's how it was just my experience of it. But yeah, that my truth can hurt others. I can hurt them just by sharing myself, my experiences. That one has kept me back the longest. And I've recently, actually, since right before we started this podcast, that's part of what this has been about, was to help me heal that part of my conditioning.
Yeah.
Was that my truth hurts. But Spirit and other mentors and guides have said, I am not responsible for how people receive my truth, so long as I speak from my heart, from a healed place. How they receive it is not on me. That's their healing journey. That's for them to deal with.
Are there any specific truths of yours that you feel like you have faced particular pushback or opposition to from others?
From others? Well, the one that I don't want to, my mind's like, that's not related, but I'm pretty sure it is, because actually I somewhat don't remember the question. That's really funny. But yeah, I think the estrangement with my father really harkens to that whole thing. Because I've been working with him the longest on my boundaries and communicating with him how I would like to receive his love, kind of attention or affection, or, reaching out and things that would make me feel good.
The truth of how you like to receive love and support in a relationship.
Right. And just how I want to be related to and connected with. And, and I have had hard conversations with him about my experiences, but I've had to oftentimes minimize it to make him feel better, because he'll not handle it very well. He'll get really, really hurt really easily, but I was the one also ridiculed for being really sensitive growing up. So yeah, like me speaking my truth, setting boundaries, doing all this stuff, for me, I had the most pushback from him. And when I finally decided to have a greater boundary because I was harmed, like emotionally and verbally, I would say that's the biggest one, the biggest pushback to my experience.
Yeah. And the truth or the pushback that you received was for the truth of just how you want to be connected with.
Well, that was all the work I put in. No, we had a fight. We had an argument. And he pushed me into anger, and I spoke my truth harshly, though. Unfortunately, I didn't get to speak it through my heart. I was in my heart, but it came out through anger because I didn't want to say it in that moment because it wasn't appropriate. And the words that I said to him was, "You are not the father I wanted, but you're the father that I needed." He is not the father I wanted growing up because I wanted one that would show up and I wouldn't have to do everything, and he would just call me and want to hang out and invite me over and do all of these lovely things to connect, teach me things, teach me how to sing, teach me how to do that, like just show up like that. But that's not who I got. I got who I needed so that I had something to heal from. So I knew how to have boundaries so that I can stand up for myself. And like, this was my truth, right? He got stuck on, "You're not the father I wanted." He got defensive, and it was the worst thing that had ever happened to him. It was the worst thing anybody ever said to him. And I'm like, oh, that's nothing. You think that was hard? That was the healed part of my truth. You don't want the unhealed part of my truth. There was no room for me to have any emotions or feelings about him growing up. And so, yeah, that was when he wouldn't listen. He wouldn't see me. He started acting out in unbecoming ways that really just showed me where he was, emotionally, maturity-wise. There is just no room for me, it feels like, for really who I am. And I felt that way a lot growing up. There really isn't a lot of room for me. I'm big. I'm big physically. I'm big emotionally. I'm big on passion. I can take up a lot of space. I get that.
You hold great space in return, though.
Thanks.
Whew.
And that's the gift part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just always felt so wrong and cursed for how I came in, sensitive, empathic. It was hard growing up being this way.
Thank you for sharing all of that. You allowed yourself to be vulnerable and to share the thing that you were worried was gonna be an emotional trigger. But I feel like you spoke all of that beautifully. And I'm so excited, but also honored that I get to be a part of the rewriting of your history. And now, literally just now, you got to experience the opposite of a lot of the challenges you faced in childhood, was the lack of being able to speak your truth, to have it be received with openness and love and acceptance. And you got to sit here after all of this work that you've done for yourself to be able to tell your story.
That was just a snippet. Just a snippet.
That's very
but
true.
Thank
Not
you.
the full story.
No.
But God, no.
God, no. Oh, man. But no, that was an interesting practice, because this is not a story or something that I share with anybody outside my inner circle.
No, it's not. And that's why I don't want this to be something that goes unnoticed.
But I don't feel like I said anything untoward or bad, as my mind would want to call it.
Yeah. No, you didn't.
Yeah, it was just a bit of my experience. That I was actually not actually expecting to share that.
No?
Necessarily. No. Partially because earlier I did feel really raw and really vulnerable. Mm-hmm. But there was something about when we were chatting about all the sounds Right? And we were getting into the episode and we just had like our like little side conversation. I really felt everything shift, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I noticed the
I
shift in
felt
you.
the regulation like come online. It's like, oh, good job, Nikki. You cried and released and processed, and now you get to feel better today. So thank you so much. It really does pay to go through your feelings and to honor them and to speak it. In the beginning, it feels like it can go on and on and on and never end, but I promise it does end. It does, and it gets faster, right? It doesn't last as long. Yeah. And that's something to pay attention to.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah, what you experienced pre-episode conversation was that, again, it's just, that's the work. That's how we continue to allow our authenticity to grow and to live from our hearts and our spirits, is by allowing the release when we need to release, the allowance of feeling what we're feeling in any given moment, because that's the definition of authenticity. It's not repressing, it's not disowning, it's not compartmentalizing for later. This is what is here now in the present, and I'm going to honor it and I'm going to feel it. Yeah, on the other side is
so much magic.
So much magic.
So much. When you're in a group of people, like when I was in massage school, we would always start with a circle. We would all just sit down and we'd each have 1 to 3 minutes to share, to get out whatever needed to get out. If you were having a shit day, you talked about your shit day. If you're like, I'm really good today. It was a really good day. I'm so glad to be here. It's on you. I'm going to give my time to the next person or whatever, Like if you had need, you took up the space. If you didn't, you held it for everybody else. And it's so helpful just to have a little bit of space to honor what you've gone through today. So you don't have to carry it. So it doesn't have to keep going on. You got it out, and it's out. And so many people are like, thank you, that feels so much better. Now I can focus. Now I can focus on the job. Now I can actually be here and present. Right? And there's a lot of community, like feeling and like giving you that like loving energy to help you transition and to shift. So sometimes just giving it the space makes it go away. The longer you just keep pushing and resisting and avoiding, it's not going to go. It's like farting in a car. You got to sometimes just give it some space and open a window and let the fresh air in.
I love the analogies you use sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes your emotions just need some space, man.
Yeah.
Just air it out. And then you could just let it go. And then you're not all crampy and holding it in and hurting yourself. It's so much better just to let it out. That was the danger, is letting things out and not having people know how to deal.
Right.
No fault, no blame, no shame, nothing. It was just how it was. And I am glad there's a lot of people out there learning how to do this, how to heal, how to hold space, how to listen, but also how to receive, how to take up space, and how to tell your truth. So it's just following what feels good. You don't need to suffer. You don't need to sacrifice who you are to make anybody happy. That's not fair to you or them. It's just unhealthy and it hurts. And there's better ways of existing. But it's practice. It's a slow process of unfolding, of giving yourself permission to be you, goofy and all. And people tell me like the things that who they are and who they tried to be, and they were trying to be like that, but they were like, but I'm like soft and gushy and fun and playful. I'm like, I love that about you. It's my favorite thing. Like I love this about who you are. I don't need you to be forceful or strong or powerful. I want you to be soft and gushy and fun. Like that's more inviting to me than the alternative. I do hope that everyone ultimately, eventually, can be at peace with who they are and have skills and figure it out, because sometimes you just don't know. And I think about that like with kids. We're taught a lot not to. You're not a cat. Stop being a cat. You're a human. Like, What if they want to be a cat today? Like, what's so wrong with that? Being in myths and magic and connecting to an animal. Like, what is wrong? What is so wrong with being creative and playful and fun and different, expressive? Next week, that might be a horse, and you'll have your field plowed. I don't know. There's got to be benefits in there somewhere. But sometimes you are who you are not in order to realize who you are. Right?
Mm-hmm. Polarity.
Mm-hmm.
Contrast.
But it also gives you the experience of knowing. Like, I can be very loud, abrasive, and harsh and mean. I could be incredibly mean and manipulative too. But that's just because I learned that through my upbringing, through my environment, my communities, my family, my friends, like everybody around me. This is just how I learned it.
Mm-hmm.
But it never felt good. But I can do things. I can do it. I choose not to because it doesn't feel right. And I think that's a lot of what growing up is trying to figure out who you are. You know, having goth phases and dark phases and woo-woo phases. I mean, whatever the phases are, you're a cat for a while, you know, like whatever. Sometimes you'll find things that will be forever. Like, oh man, I found it. Love this. You know, so, and for me, so long as it doesn't harm anybody else, I'm okay. It's just when things start to come at others' expense or if there's not consent, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That felt like a weird tangent. Anyway. Is anything I'm saying today relevant to this topic? I just gotta check it. Am I just going off on weird Nikki's processing a lot of shit tangents? Like,
there may be some truth to that, but I am also one to hold space for all of it and to trust that the things that are coming through are for someone to resonate with and to hear. But if you are feeling that way, do you want to maybe take a second? We can tune in to see if there's anything else that Spirit wants to communicate, or any other questions or thoughts lingering.
I feel pretty complete. I feel like where I'm at, I've done the best that I could. You know, nothing else is really coming up for me. I really feel like I did share a lot, even if my brain doesn't want to remember and it's incoherent. That's just because it's fucking with me today anyway.
Yeah, you know, it's kind of funny because when we were first recording this episode and we had to stop because I was having my vulnerable moment, I felt like the spotlight really was on me. And we originally decided, because I felt like I had a lot that I wanted to share and to speak on, we had agreed like, oh, okay. Like you literally said, okay, I can maybe take the reins, ask you some questions and hold the space for you to share this. And you can kind of be the one in the hot seat in this episode. And it's just funny how I think the tables have just kind of turned for this one, and you get to be in the spotlight and to share and to process more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, very interesting how this topic has manifested.
That is interesting. And thank you. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Yeah.
To speak.
Yeah.
To go through this. And thank you for sharing what happened the last time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And you talked about it.
I did talk about
That was awesome.
You talked about your stuff.
Thanks. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you feel would benefit us or the listeners, or anything in general that you feel you want to bring in?
I guess maybe just to tie in the coping mechanisms, which is the kind of loose blanket theme of this season. This is so weird. Like, I feel like my mind was really not expecting this conversation to go in this particular way. I feel like I had like a whole other list of like, oh, I want to talk about like the dangers of being in a sleeping world. And I feel like, oh, my ego will get the chance to air out all the times that I was called this, and this. And now I can sit here on this podcast and say that everybody who ever judged me or ridiculed me for these things is wrong. And this conversation did not go in that direction. which is so fascinating. I guess what I would want to close with is being awake in the sleeping world. Again, we do not say this with any ill intent
or judgment
or rudeness or demeaning to those that are not on the same journey as we are and as you, the listeners, probably are. But it's a very interesting, like you said earlier, I guess, unfolding of life and learning to allow our true nature, our heart-centered, authentic beings to take the driver's seat in our life. And I know you and I can, and I'm sure everyone can rattle on and on and on about the unfair things that we have faced throughout our life and the ways that we have been unfairly and rudely judged, ignored, denied, made fun of, made wrong for. But in this particular moment, and after having this particular discussion, my spirit and my authenticity just really feels like it just wants to express the beauty in the polarity of the contrast. Because the things that we've faced, the challenges, the hardships, the judgment, the ridicule, we would not be able to move forward and to cultivate a loving, open, heart-centered space and life for ourselves if we did not go through those hardships and face those challenges. I do not say this to invalidate anyone's experiences or to diminish the pain and the suffering that is often caused by just being a human living with other humans. But I am eternally grateful to have gone through the things that I've gone through so that way I can be motivated and focused and so driven to create a life that is fully free, to where I get to shed all of the things that are not truly me, and to create a life that is in the deepest alignment with my soul and my true nature. Shout out coping tools, shout out community, journaling, boundaries, therapy, support groups, just learning to hold space, to emotionally regulate, to just let ourselves unfold who we really are is, I think, one of the greatest things that we can do for ourselves and for others on this planet, to inspire, to lead, to allow, to hold space for. So great work to everyone listening who's doing this work alongside us.
Indeed. There is hope in my heart that there is enough room for all of us to be ourselves when we stop trying to please others and we untie our codependence and learn to be okay with who we are and how we show up despite the world around us sometimes. And we will find the community where we can shine and be safe and be seen. But it feels really good, doesn't it? Compared to how it used to be.
Oh my God.
It feels so much better to be ourselves. It's
Holy
like
cow.
almost effortless. And to be in a space and to be around someone like you, where I do feel safe and free to share what I'm really going through,
Mm-hmm.
I always feel better.
Ditto.
Like, it's so life-changing to be around people that don't feel like you're too much. Or even though they're like, all right, I have an hour, let's go. You know,
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to give you all of the time, but if they have some space and they want to support and respect and care, then you have that. And I just think it's really a blessing and quite the gift.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
God, thank you. Thank you, everyone. If you are interested in joining us next week, the topic we'll be discussing then
Oh, so excited.
is, do you want to share?
Oh, well, okay. So we've been talking a lot about coping mechanisms and tools this semester, no, this season. And we thought it would be really fun to bring on a guest to talk about various therapies. We tried to have it on our own. We realized, like, I don't really feel like we're enough to, like, really do all of this justice because there's such good stuff out there.
Yeah.
And so we were bringing in a friend of ours who does a plethora of therapy, from talk therapy to hypnosis to art therapy and dance therapy. I'm like, oh my God, you're like all in one. So please join us next week when Lacey Morris is going to join us and talk about her experiences and how she got into it and what all the different things offer you. She's even learning EMDR. I mean, this is like, I am so glad we're friends because you're awesome.
She is very awesome.
She's awesome.
I'm super stoked for our
So
conversation.
yeah, so she's going to join us next week. So we would love it if you would hear a professional talk about the various therapies out there.
Yeah. Yes. And in the meantime, if you would like to hear more content from us to hold you over, you can head on over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/NTHP podcast. The link is also in the description below. But yeah, we would be honored if you wanted to go over and join our little community there. But otherwise, we're happy to have you here and in all the places. So thanks, everyone.
Have a great week. Where was the bye, Maggie? You were supposed to say bye.
Bye.
There it is.
There it is.